I did a short video the other day on the initial impressions I had after viewing the first video that came out by the Roy's Report. And in that video, I made a couple points. I think it was like 8 or 7 points about my initial thoughts and impressions. And I mentioned that I planned on doing a deep dive when I had the opportunity to review it again. And I wanted to wait for the video that was coming out um, of Sylvia, who is the um, house employee, Joni Lamb's employee. And so here we are today. Excuse me. So I'm going to break this up in separate parts so it's easy to view because I'm going to be stopping and starting the video. So all credit goes to the Roy's Report. I'm using the video that was uploaded. The first one is going to be the one of the video, the interview of JW and Rebecca. And then I'm going to go into the one of Sylvia. So in order for it not to be super long, that's how I'm going to do it. I think that's the best way. But before we begin, I want to address something because this is based upon comments that I saw on my initial video, which I'm glad because then it just gives me the opportunity to share this and kind of clear things up. And also people were directly messaging me, asking me specific questions. Even some of the podcasters did in regard to the confusion of what an actual crime or crimes are that the detective was investigating and why charges were not brought. And people referring to witnesses being Sylvia, JW, or Rebecca. So I want to first off note that these interviews were done almost a year ago. They were done in January of 2025 when detectives were investigating whether there was a crime committed and investigating who could have committed the crime. That's what they're tasked with, okay? We're going to go through what they're looking at. So I know that there's a video of Joshua Brown that's likely coming out this week. I want to do a dedicated video on that, which I will do once that's up. As I stated in my prior video, there is a difference between an interview and an interrogation. An interrogation is a very different way of questioning somebody. It's a person of interest. It's a suspect. And perhaps they're going to have to read that person their Miranda rights if they're in custody and they're going to be questioning them. But an interview is different. An interview is really kind of casual. I shared that before. And that's what we see with Rebecca and Jonathan Weiss, her husband. So what I suspect is that because there was not, I want to make that clear, there was not an identification of Joshua Brown in regard to the outcry. Okay, we're going to get into that. That I suspect, I don't know for sure, that when they brought Joshua Brown in for questioning, and he's there with the same attorney, I believe, it might have been a different one, but it was probably handled more like an investigation. That's what I suspect, but we shall see because that video will be coming out. So we know that Jonathan and Susie went to the Colleyville Police Department to disclose what their daughter said to Susie. Remember, the act was outcried by the daughter to Susie. There was a specific act of SA, and Susie described it. Well, Susie said that her daughter described it. She didn't share with us what that was. We can just imagine what that was. Very, very bad. But remember, when Susie's daughter made that outcry, it was partial. The act was described, but the identity of the perpetrator was not made. So we have a partial outcry. You have specifics about the crime, but you don't have the identity of the perpetrator. Remember, there's another person who heard the outcry. Remember, Susie wanted to go to the police, and she told Joni that. And Joni said, no, bring the child to me. So Joni thwarted that process of initially bringing her child to the police department because if they had, they would have brought in a forensic interviewer right away, and perhaps the child would have disclosed right away, and perhaps even disclosed the identity of the perpetrator right away. But we don't have that. And it's just a matter of, unfortunately, they did not know to do that. They had no reason not to trust Joni at that time. And it is what it is. It's no fault on anybody. That's just the facts. So before I go further, it still remains a mystery as to why Joni Lamb was not investigated for potential obstruction. I don't know if she was. I would suspect, this is my personal interpretation, my opinions. I suspect that if they did ask her to come in voluntarily, she probably said no. So with that backdrop, we have an incomplete outcry. But it is enough to bring to the police. Then you add in all the other things, right? The concerns that Jonathan and Susie had about Joshua Brown. Enter in the babysitter. Remember, the babysitter said that she was creeped out by Joshua Brown, that Joshua Brown would come to their house to play with the children when they were not home. Approximately 8 months after the partial outcry, they're at the beach house in Florida where Susie knew something was not right when she told her daughter to go upstairs, get changed, and then Joshua Brown, follows her upstairs. And what did Jonathan see? His young daughter nude in that room, and Joshua Brown was in there. So, and I believe at least a year earlier, Joshua Brown tells Jonathan and Susie that their same daughter just happened to walk in on him nude as he's in the bathroom. Then sprinkle in the information from Jonathan, Weiss, and Rebecca that they had witnessed some things that were concerning with the kissing and the touching, and Sylvia as well. So all of that is the bucket of information, so to speak, that's dumped onto the investigator, which is the detective. This is all given to him, likely, right? Well, we know it is. And again, we're looking back in time because these interviews happened in January. So then you've got the information about Joshua Brown allegedly making advances on another ministry worker in Australia, a man. You've got that. But that isn't directly on point with the other things. And it's in a different country. So the police is focusing on the concerning activities, the things that they observed. Okay. So they have to investigate, one, if a crime was committed, who committed it, and in what jurisdiction, meaning where did it happen? So while the kissing is troubling, in theory, it could be considered an unwanted sex encounter, touching, but that's not something that's typically going to be prosecuted. When I was a sex crimes prosecutor, that in and of itself, that's not going to be prosecuted. So they're left with the extremely troubling act that the child disclosed to Susie, but is no longer speaking about. And again, no outcry as to the identity. So since no one is named, that's why they're bringing everybody in to kind of figure this out. All they can do is gather the personal information from the people that are mentioned. Now, a nanny was mentioned. I don't know if that nanny was ever interviewed. Obviously, Rebecca and Jonathan come in, and then Joshua comes in. Doesn't look like Joni did. Who knows? But that's what's going on here. And so there's no witness to the really bad crime. So let me just make this clear. That's why he wasn't arrested, Joshua Brown, because there's no identity. And if you're to consider Susie's testimony that the outcry was made to her, okay, that's fine, but there's still no identity. So I hope that clears it up. The other things that they talk about where people are saying, oh, there's witnesses, Sylvian, that's to the kissing and other things. While those things are concerning, that is not in and of itself going to be a crime. Then you get to the piece of evidence with the letter, which in and of itself is hearsay. That would not come into evidence. However, bringing it in for the detective to read to determine if there's any information in there that could constitute a crime, that's what he's looking for. That's the importance of it. So I would imagine that the detective was looking for any information in there that, may have been more troubling than perhaps the kiss. I mean, that's troubling, but you just got to look at it from what the detective is looking at. What do I have a crime? Do I have evidence of a crime? And based upon these videos, it appears that there was an actual eyewitness to the crucial moments in regard to the beach house. And that would have been Israel, their son. It appears that he was likely in the room already. That's what it appears to me. I don't have confirmation, but from these videos, he was in the room already. And then perhaps his sister comes up, she's changing. And I don't know if he's in a different part of the room. We don't really know, but it sounds as if he was a witness. Now, if that's the case, and the detective was made aware of that, then right away you bring that child to be forensically interviewed by someone who is forensically trained. And as I've shared before, that's something I would have done as a prosecutor because I was forensically trained. Now, in certain jurisdictions, they don't have the prosecutors, they have other people do that, but I don't even know if that was ever done. So, all right, we're going to get into this video. All right, so I'll bring in a bigger copy. All right, so, they come in, and when they come into the room, they're just making small talk, right? Let me get to where they are. Give me a minute. It's
You go ahead. Yeah, sit over there and I'll just sit it. Is it better? How you want it there?
Whatever you want to do it. Usually I like to let people there.
okay. So this is normal. There's going to be a table, and you're going to have the investigator on one side and then the witnesses on the other with their attorney. As I said before, not uncommon for an attorney to be there, especially with this. I mean, they've got a huge, billion-dollar company, of course, and everything to lose. And of course, they're going to have their attorney with them, and they are representatives of Daystar, so they're going to have their attorney with them. So, they do an introduction, and then the investigator says, "Do you have questions for me?" And then they get into it.
Guys, got any questions for me before we start? It'll be very quick and painless. All me out of questions.
I know people are saying, "Oh, quick and painless," and they don't like that. Well, it's rapport building, and it's also, he's got to handle these guys to the best of his ability. It's three. It's not that they're in a, adversarial setting, but it is three against him. He's got to be able to, figure things out. He's got to make people feel comfortable. And I do believe that they are comfortable, just based upon their positioning. They don't seem to be closed off. They do seem to be candid based upon, just their appearance.
I'm just grateful to reach out because, we wanted to do the right thing the whole time this stuff has been going on from the very beginning.
I think that they were honest there. I think that, they're candid. They did want to do the right thing. I said this in the other video. You've got to separate witnesses. I would not have done it this way. I would have separated them, even though there's overlap in information. You want each one telling you their personal knowledge. You don't want, because you're going to see later that there's a lot of this head bobbing with Rebecca. There's a lot of she refers to we, and it's never clarified whether she actually witnesses something. I suspect that she didn't. She's just including herself. And there are times that she even cuts people off, mostly her husband. So for those reasons alone, I would separate them. That's just how it works. It's not something a dig on. It's just, I deal with it every day. You just, and you have to control what's going on as the interviewer, and, there are follow-up questions, but some that he could have done. Very easy for us to Monday night quarterback it. But, again, he's got three people that he's trying to handle.
And so
Literally the last thing that we had felt, was what if we talked to somebody at the police department and we didn't know how to do that. So Kerji, appreciate it.
And then he reached out to us and we're like, oh, perfect.
It was just good timing.
Well, yeah, I would have done it a little sooner, but I guess I kind of had the feeling of course it was inaccurate. I kind of had the feeling you guys just want to talk to me. So I relayed messages, but.
That's interesting. So the detective says he would have reached out, but he got the feeling that they weren't going to reach out back. And he says he relayed messages, and it's not clear what he did. But it does sound, maybe he sent emails and they just ignored it. So I thought that was very interesting.
That's what I asked you. When did the last time you talked to dropped that Susie and Susie? You said 18 months or so.
Yeah.
So couple y'all did because off hard work.
Yeah.
All right. So this part talking about being cut off. All right. So I just want to preface it with this. Jonathan and Susie are going to have their version and impressions, right? And then Rebecca and JW, they're going to have their own. So we have to handle it in that manner, okay? Whether you don't find them credible or not. I mean, I find them to be candid. Are there things that they say troubling to me? Yes, there are. What my impression is overall of them are that they're conflicted. They're conflicted individuals. Remember, this is not something that's happening today after everything that's come out. This is happening in January. So their information is coming from Joni Lamb and the internet. It's clear that they're looking at the internet. Just like Joni saying, oh, I don't watch it. And Rebecca says something to the sort, oh, not really. They're watching it. They're very, very concerned with it. And it's clear. But that's where their information is coming from. Because just as much, Jonathan and Susie said that they're very close with this couple. And there's, some intimation at least that they agree with that and corroborate that. But, now she's saying that they're not. And they're obviously not in communication with Jonathan and Susie. So the information they're sharing and the reason that they don't trust that, it's coming from Joni. That's where it's coming from. My opinion. I have to preface it with that. My opinion.
They cut us off and they didn't even tell us they were cutting us off. They just
Cool. It's bizarre is if you go online and look at like that, it seemed like, that they didn't do that or that they're waiting for us to help them in some way.
Okay, where would they get that? Because they're Jonathan and Susie, they were both on videos. They were being interviewed, and this was in November, December, and they were talking about how they had no provision. Jonathan was terminated in November. I think my impression, that's where that statement comes from, that they wanted us to help because and also not just that, it could be financially, but I think more so, and that's just, again, something that is my impression, more so what they're saying is help was to get these two on Jonathan and Susie's side, because obviously they're listening and watching the interviews by Jonathan and Susie, who's saying that these two were concerned that they had their back. Remember, had their back at the beach house. And that's what they're talking about here. And to me, they're really minimizing it. And, maybe even a little bit, contemptuous that, this is my impression. They started off with, we got cut off hardcore, right? I think that they're bitter about that. And then you see Jonathan Weiss or JW, he's saying this, let's go through it. And I think that it leads up to that, saying, well, they wanted us to help them, but, I think that they're a bit offended.
And I actually ran into him in person for the first time in a year and a half, and he said nothing to me. I had to engage conversation with him, and he never said, can you speak out or nothing. He acted like things were
Actually, that 45.
so.
It's obvious that both of them cut each other off. They do. I don't like that. That's just my personal preference. I don't like when they're not even looking at each other and they're just cutting each other off. So she's talking about something, and then JW cuts her off and starts, over her talking to the attorney, talking about how him and Jonathan used to go to the gym F45 together. And then she just over both of them, it's kind of like an assertion of dominance. That's my impression, but you be the judge.
What's happened with you there? We
So awkward. We used to go together for a long time, and then obviously when he decided that we were the enemy or whatever, and so
Decided that we were the enemy. You can only get that from Joni or watching the interviews and based upon your own conclusions. So that's interesting to me.
I ran into it there, and he just looked at me and didn't say anything. I was like, "Hi," and he said hi back. That was it.
Didn't say anything like, not hate you. So
No.
How's I said, how's it going? He's like, going good.
And I think that because of this is when she segues into I don't trust them. That's where I think that comes from.
Sorry. Well, he can obviously vouch for it, but just because the accusation was made, if there's an NDA saying you can't talk about sexual abuse from child, there's negated. Yeah, I understand. That was the accusation. The NDA, I always remember.
All right. We know about the NDA. Let me skip just a little bit.
So anything is because there was nothing incriminating that we could report.
Yeah, he said there's nothing incriminating to report in regard to why. It sounds like, let me just back that up a little bit just to make sure.
Proprietary information, yeah. As any business, yeah, as this company, yeah, anyone has, that's to remain proprietary. That's it. That's the NBA. The only reason we never said anything is because there was nothing incriminating that we could report that we knew of, and we're not going to go online and play, slander with a bunch of online people.
Notice that? I mean, it's brought up a couple times about, online and slander with online people. It's referenced. He despises it, it appears, and Joni does too, because she references that in social media and on stage and all that. But he also appears to be, I don't know if it's intimidated by it. Yeah, I guess intimidated by it, because you're going to see later his concern is that he doesn't want this letter getting out to the media. So I feel as though, and we all have this, right? We're all concerned with what people are going to say about us, but that is something that I clearly noticed that he's very concerned with.
We've always submitted everything to leadership, not only the family, but organizationally, and that's all you really do. And to the parents too.
And I don't trust them for a lot of different reasons.
You gotta clarify them because there's a lot.
Jonathan and Susie. I don't trust Jonathan and Susie, even though I was close to them. And one of the reasons why I don't even trust their motives in this, of course, I don't know their motives, is if you really believe he did something, you sat on that for a whole year and a half or however long, and you didn't tell us. And
Okay. Is she referring to the really, really bad act that had the partial outcry? It has to be, because they knew of the other things. They knew about what happened at the beach house twice, with the exposure in the bathroom, and the other thing that was the more recent. And, they obviously knew about the kissing. So, and you guys can fill in the gaps for me. I didn't know that they didn't know. I just assumed that when that happened, when the child outcried, that the family knew, but perhaps that didn't happen. So this might be what she's talking about. I suspect that she's offended again. She's offended because they didn't tell her, and she's got a kid, and, I get it. We're concerned about that, but that's what I saw, that she's, again, it's building on this. They're not happy with how the relationship went with Jonathan and Susie. That's my impression.
we have a daughter. That to me was a huge red flag. Because if you care about justice and you care about protecting kids, why was it more important to you to sabotage and do your sneak?
Sabotage and do your sneak. Does that sound like something Joni would say? Perhaps. So what is she talking about? Now, he doesn't really clarify that. I would have asked, just because it's a credibility issue. She is attacking Jonathan and Susie's credibility here, right? So credibility is a big issue when you're investigating a crime. So as the detective, I would have inquired about that.
Thing than to come warn us as parents when we've always tried to look out and do the right thing and care.
We always like to look out, do the right thing, and care. She says that throughout. We're caring people. We're caring people. It's intimating that, I'm virtuous, I'm righteous. It's just virtue signaling, which is problematic. Say it once, don't say it 5 times.
Me, it just didn't make any sense to me.
So obviously you guys have read all the stuff online. Right?
Not all of it is quite. That's what I'm talking about. Not all of it. They have. They like to say that they don't. They have. You can tell. My opinion.
I'm free.
For the protection of my own health. That is really upsetting. It was really upsetting for me.
It's okay. He has a lot out there, a lot of stuff that
And he laughs. The detective says there's a lot of stuff out there, and JW goes, "Tch." He laughs. All right, let's get to
you guys will read like everything this. Because I do some of that too, but it's one of those things where it could be seen in both ways. That's why we need every bit of information we get.
Yeah.
Where are you right now? You guys are a big part of the missing puzzle for me. So that sounds like you guys. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
yes, they are a big part of that puzzle because we've heard that they knew things. And that's why they're brought in here. And we're going to get into the letter